Where's Sotek? He has yet to arrive. We kind of expected this. He and I had a bit of a discussion beforehand as I pulled my mic over because it was halfway around the room. He and I had a discussion beforehand and he said he might be late this week, and it looks like he is. So I figured I'm just going to go live anyway. So, hi! It's one Lorebeard, so perhaps I should scrub out that little extra S sitting up the top corner, although it will probably be up in this top corner if I'm doing it accurately. So, hi everyone, my name's Andy Law, and today we are discussing, we're not entirely sure, as you may note from the little bit at the bottom, we're waiting for Sotek to turn up. That being the case, we'll just dive into some quick question and answers and whatever else happens before he eventually arrives. If he doesn't turn up within the next half hour or so, we'll make this stream that was planned today, which is a discussion about all the various schools of magic in the Warhammer world, and then tiering them up, because that's always awesome. We'll do that next week. So, let's have a quick have a look and see, what does Archimagio say? I've almost certainly said your name. Archimagio, perhaps? Archimagio? Different ways. First, thanks very much. And second, thanks for these. Not a problem. Waited a long time for this one for Heish section in LAWhammer's finale to... it's a bit of a spoiler, but nevertheless, Shadows over Bergenhafen. Andy's description of light wizard spells was fascinating. Does Heish incorporate harmonics, force resonance with other winds? Is that how chaos works? Or chaos, if you prefer. So, Heish does indeed involve a great deal of musicality, if you wish it to do so. The Light College, for example, has cantors. They have singers that help bring in that particularly difficult diffuse wind, that is Heish. Heish is a very, very difficult wind to channel in comparison to the other winds. And it does indeed incorporate harmonics as a part of it. Force resonance with other winds, well, that's a completely different thing. That is definitely not how the Colleges of Magic teaches. They very much deal with each one of the 8 individual winds separately and don't deal with using one wind potentially benefiting another. However, if we were to move over to Safri and see how the High Elves teach, they use the winds of magic in a very different way. And this is one way that you could imagine it work. Each one of the winds has got different strengths and weaknesses. And yes, they can be incorporated together for a variety of effects, but it is exceedingly dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a pointer. And for those of you turning up late, Sotek is also late. So don't worry. Looks like you're not alone. Hopefully he'll arrive. If he doesn't turn up in the next half hour or so, we will probably move today's scheduled stream, which is about the Colleges of Magic, and tiering them all up as we discuss exactly what each one of them is and how they express in Altdorf and other schools of magic elsewhere. We'll do that next Wednesday. Right, let's move down to Hannibal. Hey, Hannibal. Evening, boys. Well, sadly, at the moment, it's just evening boy. I'm the evening boy. I'm 8 pints of Bugman's deep. Oh, bye. But I'm holding out for the stream. Good job, Hannibal. Me too. I was wondering which winds you thought made up blood magic in universe. It depends on which blood magic we go for. There's all manner of different types of magic that use blood as an incorporated part of it. So if you're still out there, is there specific magic that you're discussing? Because there's different answers I will give depending upon which magic you're discussing. So I'll look out for that as I now scroll down. As Splinter then says, more sacrifices are needed to summon Sotek. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Moving down to Skithane. I haven't gotten to the episode of LAWhammer yet, but I heard Andy mention more than 8 winds of magic. Orange wind, pink wind. What are these? Okay, there are, in the wider Warhammer lore, all manner of weird and strange and unexpected nuggets of lore that have been dropped over the course of some 40 years worth of Warhammer writing. Orange wind has indeed been mentioned in a couple of sources. It's called Orch. The pink wind also has been mentioned, Sleeve. Now, both of these are about as unofficial nowadays as you can possibly get. They're not real winds of magic as far as Games Workshop's concerned. There's 8 winds of magic and that's it. But of course, when you're playing at home, you can do whatever you want. And if you want to draw upon any of the older lore or the more obscure lore, you're absolutely welcome to do so. And if you wish to do so, Orch and Sleeve could be additional winds that you use. For example, in LAWhammer, we have definitely drawn upon some weird and odd pieces of lore. And in our version, magic is a little more complicated than just 8 winds, but there are just 8 winds. It's a complicated setup. But yes, there are more if you go into the broader lore, but as far as the most current lore is concerned, there are only 8. But do be aware that those 8 winds often manifest in some very strange ways. For example, take a look at how Cathay uses the winds of magic and how they present them, where you've got a wind like Azir, which is also working on earth magic. So there's a variety of different ways the winds can manifest anyway. And if you'd rather they manifested with a slight twist of the winds, you could very much do that. It's up to you. Away you go. I'm now going to look out to see if I can find out if Hannibal's still out there, because I asked him to mention. Are you there, Hannibal? There we go! For blood magic, specifically what about blood sacrifices that led to the birth of Sotek? If the blood of the Skaven made up Sotek's power, wouldn't that almost give Sotek a Skaven soul? Now, that's a particularly interesting way of viewing it. So if we're looking at the sacrifices, now, when it comes to religious stuff, it's not, strictly speaking, magic. Sacrifices, magic that, for example, humans use when they're doing divine magic, isn't using the winds of magic in the way that we normally understand it. And it is generally perceived to be the gods themselves that are involved. That is not always the case. Some versions of the lore say that it is the winds of magic being used in subtle ways that we don't understand. For example, if we go to some of Teclis's teaching, he believes that many of the clerics that you find in the Empire that are doing various divine miracles are in fact latent spellcasters, and it has nothing to do with their gods at all, and it is actually magic that's being used, even though he is yet to pin down exactly how that works or why he can't dispel many of the effects that these various clerics are capable of doing. So here, if we're going to go with the official answer, the answer is it isn't magic, it is divine, it is soul stuff that is being moved off into the aether that is helping channel up and build a god on the other side. That would be one way of viewing it. However, if you wish to view it as magic, you absolutely could, and you would probably use it as a mixture of Hish, which is very appropriate for a great snake god, if you know anything about the white wind of magic, and almost certainly Jade. A nice mixture there that I think speaks a great deal towards as well the Lizardman as a whole. Hish and Jade are 2 winds that work very closely with much of what the Lizardman represents. So hopefully that answers the question that you were looking for there. Hey, David! Or David, it might be. I have no certainty as to which way you pronounce it. Can you paint with all the colours of the wind? Now, that is an interesting way of phrasing a question. I'm not entirely sure what you're asking there. Can you paint with all colours of the wind? So I'm going to choose to interpret your question this way. And I've got it wrong, David. Drop in another comment and I'll turn to it. And I'll say that can you use each of the different 8 winds of magic to create effects that are multicolored? And the answer to that is no, but yes. Many of the winds are designed, well, designed is the wrong way of putting it. Many of the winds in use create effects that have particular colours, but some winds, more than others, create effects that might be multicoloured. The grey wind, for example, is all about illusion and trickery, and it can create almost any colour in many of its different manifested ways. The bright wind uses empirical fire. Even though it's the red wind, when it throws fire, it's real-world fire, and fire moves all the way from deep reds all the way up through oranges into yellows. So it's got lots of different colours that sometimes manifest through it, and then also the smoke that comes off that, various greys and blacks and everything in between there, all the way up to whites. If we move to something like the gold magic, that tends to be, again, heat for a lot of it, but gold outcomes and metallic outcomes are very common. So you find it moves into greys and yellows. And this is one of the reasons why you might find inside the Warhammer world various scholars saying that there's more to the winds of magic than just simply the core colors that are often perceived and used in the 8 winds. But broadly speaking, each of the winds has its own color, and they work around that area. The amethysts work in deep blues, deep purples, and into blacks. Your jade wizards are mostly in your greens and your blues and your watery sort of colors, but they are mostly over in the green area. Your amber wizards are dealing largely with browns and ochres and oranges, and sometimes all the way up into yellow effects. But most of the winds sort of stick in their own quadrant, so to speak. Hey, this is Meister. Are any of the colleges as good as the Unseen University? And which colleges would Rincewind, Redkillian the Librarian example fit into? So the Unseen University is not entirely dissimilar to how some people perceive at least some parts of the colleges of magic. People can't help but draw upon the literature and the media that they already know. So I've seen quite a few different versions of the colleges of magic both pitched to me when I was writing Warhammer, or I was responsible for dealing with other people's work and producing their work and developing it. Or alternatively, when they're just creating their own games at home. And it's not uncommon to find people drawing on things like Harry Potter or the Unseen University, or indeed any of those. But you tend to find that the colleges of magic are really quite discreet and unique and different to any of those things. For all there may be some things that are at least recurrent in a few of the colleges, libraries, for example. The biggest library almost certainly being inside the Light College, unless, of course, you believe that the library in the Grey College is bigger, unless, of course, you believe that the library ad infinitum, meaning that, say, for example, the librarian could fit in almost any of them, although I would say that the Light College is probably going to be where he would be expected to fit by most, or alternatively Celestial. Celestial is probably where Rincewind's probably going to be ending up too. So any of the colleges would do, but the most classic of them in terms of your towers and your wizards wandering around looking like wizards with pointy hats and star symbols is probably going to move down to your Celestial College. Hopefully that helps. Hey, Archimagio, before I answer your question, I'm going to say we are, of course, waiting for Sotek to hopefully arrive. I'm going to stream for a wee while in the hope that he turns up, and if he does, great. If he doesn't, never mind. We'll just have a nice little Q&A, and we'll postpone our planned stream, which is a big tier list for all the colleges of magic and other schools of magic across the Warhammer world. We'll put that back to next Wednesday. So, Archimagio, light is a particle and a wave. Ah, now we're talking. And a certain for a patriarch may have just had an epiphany. You know, Archimagio, I think you're possibly onto something. And for those of you who watch the LAWhammer streams, which is where I play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay every week live online like an idiot from my living room, the core of what's going on with the Light College, the failures of the Light College that eventually produced Egrim van Horseman, who was their patriarch and became, as many of you probably out there already know, a Chaos Magus from hell, and effectively took a chunk of the colleges with them and formed the Cabal, a great group of ex-colleges of magic wizards that now are effectively Chaos cultists. That could be something that is indeed tied up with that. I won't say what it is in LAWhammer, because LAWhammer has its own story for those events, and the full nature of what Egrim is something that will eventually come out over time. But yeah, you're definitely potentially onto something there. Scathane, how does divine spellcasting sound? I understand the lingua prestantia, yes, but I doubt priests of Sigmar are shouting words in Anaquaean. No, they're not. But if you can't speak arcane language, how do they cast spells? So Scathane, this is a long-standing issue between either writers, because some of them haven't decided exactly how this should be expressed, or alternatively in-world by the various scholars that study these things. But we can say one thing for certain. Prayers and miracles are empowered generally in the languages of the cult themselves. So, for example, the cult of Sigmar uses four core languages. The first language is Reichspiel, as the language of the Empire, and many of their prayers are spoken in Reichspiel. And now, if you are a blessed priest, that is a priest that the god has marked out to be able to empower their prayers, if you say a blessing, like, for example, I bless this child to be healthy. That's a really crap prayer. It's not a real one. Most of the prayers will have a few stanzas of words. You say the prayer and you say it, and there might be a miraculous effect. Now, if it's just a simple little blessing, you might go around laying on hands, giving a simple little healing prayer, and it doesn't appear that it does anything at all. But the blessing of Sigmar will be laid upon them if you happen to be blessed. If you're not blessed, you just do that prayer. And the vast majority of the priests of Sigmar in the Empire aren't blessed. They just say the prayers by rote and they don't do anything. But for those who are blessed, they do something. Miracles are a completely different kettle of fish. Miracles are big, flashy things. Again, they are prayers. The actual prayers. They read out the prayer. Lord Sigmar, bring down this comet upon their head. Is a quick, very short version of a slightly more extensive prayer. They bellow their praise to Sigmar, and very possibly a comet comes flying out of the sky and strikes their enemies, because that's awesome. Again, not in the lingua prestantia. Now, I said that there's three languages that the Cult of Sigmar uses. Worth quickly going into them. They use Reichspiel. They use Classical. Classical is very common for a lot of older prayers. Classical is the core language of scholars in the Empire, was first introduced to the Empire during the time of Sigmar, and actually a little bit before that. Classical is an old language, and all the first books, well, most of the first books that the Empire has are written in Classical, and all the oldest prayers of Sigmar are mostly in Classical. But there's also another language that sort of runs hand in hand with Classical, and that's Old Unberigan. Unberigan is the language that would originally have been spoken by Sigmar back in the day. It's nothing like Reichspiel. Reichspiel and Unberigan are a little bit like saying Old English and English, or Old High German and Modern German. They're very different languages, even though one is related to and succeeded after the other. So a lot of old prayers are in this old language too. Finally, Sigmar and the dwarfs get on really well. Now, their prayers aren't written in the dwarf tongue of Kazalid, but much of Sigmar verse is recorded in Kazalid as well. So many Sigmarite priests will know that. Most of their prayers are spoken in Reichspiel and Classical. And this comes as a surprise for wizards, particularly elven wizards who arrive and expect these divine miraculous effects to be effectively just spells, but they're not doing it the way spells are meant to work. They find it deeply confusing. Teclis has got more than one treatise on why he thinks divine miracles are nothing to do with gods, and they are in fact just magic being expressed in a strange and relatively unique way, channeled by their faith. But they still don't work like normal spells. So, loosely speaking, if you are, say, a priest of Mor, you're likely to be doing your prayers in Classical. If you're a priest of Ulrich, you're likely to be doing it in Old Teutogen, which is the original language of the Teutogen tribe that used to worship Ulrich up in the north, or possibly in Reichspiel. If you're doing it as Ranald did, it's most likely to be Reichspiel and possibly Gutter Reichspiel. Again, assuming one's in the Empire. If you're down in Tilia and you're a blessed priest of Ranald, it'll be in Tilian or possibly in Old Classical. So it is very much in the language of the people that are doing it. Hopefully that helps. Bear Mattel, hi fam, hi in return. Any tips on play-by-post DMing for a solo wizard? Yes. I've done, whilst it wasn't necessarily play-by-post, I've done a lot of play-by-post in my time. But if I'm going to say this one relatively loosely, Bear Mattel, I'd say decide what sort of tale you want to be telling, decide how you're going to be using the magic that your wizard is doing. For example, if you are doing a bright wizard, it's a classic. That's what we have, for example, in the LAWhammer game that we play every week. If you're doing a bright wizard, you need to decide how the bright college works, how the master of the wizard works, how the master's other students work, which gives you a potential, not just friends, but effectively almost a family of wizards, all of whom draw from the same master, who in turn will have a master before them and a master before them, all of them teaching a similar style of magic. Think about the different ways the magic will manifest for different wizards within that college. So, for example, you might have more destructive versions of bright wizardry, which are all about bringing real fire into the world. You might have a more mystical version of bright wizardry, which is more about bringing fire into the hearts and bringing courage and using fire in a more metaphorical fashion. You might have yourself someone who uses fire to do things that aren't expected, to use fire with healing, scalding, and burning out corruption, for example. There's lots of different ways that the fire magic could be manifested inside your game. And think about how the different masters do that. Start building up a big pile of NPCs, really, that manifest each one of these magics in different ways so that you can get different types of magic in your game, and then start building the politics between these groups. Because whenever you have people, they start falling into different political viewpoints. Decide what the political banks are for your college, and immediately you've got yourself a bunch of stories that you can tell with your College of Magic, both in terms of being an apprentice, working their way up, different conflicting views, each of which are trying to control the college in their own way. Then, of course, moving then externally, deciding what sort of external threats you want your wizard to deal with. So, loosely, I would say build up the politics of the College of Magic for the way that you want it to manifest in your game, and then think about how that works out outwards, and then suddenly the stories start telling themselves. I'm not sure if that's going to be much use to you. I hope it is. I will move down to Prince Teclis. And again, for those of you turning up late, we're waiting for Sotek to hopefully arrive, as it says, scrolling across the bottom of the screen there. If he turns up, great. If he doesn't, we will take our planned stream for doing the Winds of Magic as a tier list, and we will pass that on to next Wednesday for Lorebeards. So anyway, continuing on, what languages does Gelt speak? I want to know which I can insult him in without him knowing. So if we take a look at Gelt as an overall character, he is a bit of a mysterious chappy. I've had actual conversations about this behind the scenes as to what we should do with Gelt. And Gelt likely speaks multiple old world languages. He's, after all, not from the Empire. Reichspiel is not likely not only his first language, it's probably not even his fourth or fifth. He almost certainly speaks some of the many languages down the border princes. Tilian, almost certainly. Maybe Estalian. Classical, definitely. Lingua Prestantia, absolutely required. Reichspiel, again, absolutely required. Very likely has some Wastelander in there as well. If we take a look at what many alchemists study, it's likely he has Kazalid in there too, so we can speak about the Dwarven texts and take a look at all of their great advances that they've had in alchemy. And that's pretty important too. So at the very least, that there's a outside chance that he'll be able to read some, if not all, Eltherin as well. An awful lot of core magical texts that the elves have produced are written in Eltherin, which is their language. So it's very likely he can speak that. The likelihood of him having some form of Anaquaean is very low, because that's the magical language of the elves and is, if anything, even more complicated than Eltherin. But it's very possible he does have it. And with some writers, I imagine they probably would give him Eltherin at a minimum. Beyond that, taking a look around, Mootish, nah. Bretonnian, yeah, Bretonnian's likely. Norscan, there's lots of different languages of Norscan, dialects. They're basically different languages for the different tribes. That's a possibility. I'd say the big question you should decide is how much of his background, as it's written in various books, is actually true, and deciding where your version of Gelt actually comes from and who he actually is, because Gelt is a somewhat mysterious figure, and he has definitely done a few dodgy things in his time. And if we take a look at what he does in the end times, he makes some deeply weird choices, meaning that his background is likely different to what many people expect to lead him to a position where he'd be willing to do the things that he did. Moving down to Ricky Chapman. We remember our time at the Colleges of Magic Golem Fight Club, getting into a vodka drinking contest with a visiting ice, which we lost, almost unleashing a greater demon of Nargle. Good times. Hey, Ricky, your game continues to sound awesome. So there are various types of creature animated from not just clay, golem style, but if we go over towards the Jade College, they often have a whole variety of very similar style creatures. They're made of root, vine, marsh, and bog, much as you'd expect for effectively copy-pasting creatures out of the old Albion stuff put together by Gav. So, yeah, that sounds absolutely awesome. Slightly jealous of your game sometimes, although LAWhammer is proper mental. If you're arriving late, yes, we're waiting for Sotek to hopefully turn up. If he doesn't, we will just do a bit more of a Q&A, and then we'll do the ranking of the Colleges of Magic next week. Chris, does each college wizard have a preference for certain looks in a familiar? Yes, is the general answer for this, and specific answer is it's down to each wizard. There are different types of familiars. Some familiars are manifested within constructed devices. So, for example, you might build yourself a clockwork man and then effectively empower it with a soul and use that as a familiar. Some familiars are actual real animals, cats, dogs, some equivalent. And those are, again, down to personal preference. Some people are cat people. Some people are dog people. I'm a cat person, much to the disgust of Andy Leask, who is in my role-playing group because he's hyper allergic to cats. Then also you've got various other weird gribblies, let's call it that, effectively summoning up a spirit and bringing it into material form. And there's all sorts of crazy stuff, be it walking books, weird moon-faced individuals, or more. They can also act as familiars, and some people have got a greater or lesser tolerance for that style of familiar. Some people are totally happy to have a weird guy in the corner that looks like a little weird homunculus. Others are not at all interested in that and would much rather have something that can pass in normal society without marking them out for being a witch. So it is really down to the individual wizard. David Whitfield, given Egram and Johan were both light wizards, is the Light College most susceptible to chaos? No. But the Light College does have something that means that it is susceptible to some types of problems. And that's because the Light College is very much all about learning. That's a loose way of putting it. And using logic. And logic means that a whole host of potential outcomes that favor chaos can be arrived at. And indeed, the logical process that Egram has to effectively become who he is a core component, one would presume, of why many of the light wizards went with him. He learned something that was real, and he showed it was real. So logically, he was right. And that means that there is a certain susceptibility there, but all of the colleges have also got their own problems. Indeed, some of the colleges are so acutely aware of those problems that they'll only recruit and allow certain types to graduate from them. The Grey College is a fine example of this. Grey magic is very powerful. All the magics are powerful, but grey magic can effectively, through its illusions, make people's minds effectively change. It's nasty stuff in the wrong hands. So all grey wizards go through a very rigorous recruitment process. Indeed, according to some of the background books, only certain types of people will ever be accepted, even as an apprentice of the Grey College. They don't like taking on older apprentices because they'll already be fixed in their ways. They like younger apprentices, preferably young teenagers who've yet to figure out everything in the world, so that their master can then impress upon them just how important it is to have the correct character and do the right thing to be a Grey. So all of them are susceptible in their own ways. After all, if we run with the core of what Warhammer Magic is, it comes from chaos. Chaos is sitting in the souls of all wizards. And that being the case, Yeah, they're all relatively susceptible. Just because Egram and Johan, in this particular instance, fell to chaos in their own ways doesn't mean that the other colleges don't have their own problems. Hey, Hendrik, hope you're doing well out there. How do elves keep tabs on Waystones and Colleges? So the answers for this vary according to the books that we read, and sometimes it's just painted in very broad brushstrokes. Oh, the elves help set up the Waystones across the world to channel magic over to the great vortex that sits above Ulthuan. And the elves, they sort of look after this great network, kinda. And then we go to another book and it says the elves didn't set up this network. It was created by the old ones, or it was created by the lizardmen. And the elves jumped on this existing network and used it for their own purposes. And then other ones will say loads of these Waystones have collapsed and no one does anything about it. And then the next book says, but some elves or some wizards or someone else are constantly out there trying to fix them. And the answer to this is weak. But loosely, the Tower of Magic, the White Tower, over in Safri, where the Loremasters of the High Elves gather, is one of the core places where this is looked after. And they are directly responsible to this. And the Colleges of Magic, to a degree, now, this might be controversial to some, but it's kind of true. The Colleges of Magic are subservient to them. They're not, in any way, shape, or form. But the Colleges of Magic were set up by elves, Teclis in particular, the current High Lore Master of Magic, over in the White Tower of Safri, and they were taught all the same core lessons, which included Waystones have to be looked after. There's a few stories, for example, where Teclis approached the Jade Druids, as they were before the Jade College was existing, but went to them and said, hey, Druids, all these great stone circles, they're not really stone circles of power to your old gods. What they are is Waystones, and let me show you the truth of what they are. And he went to some of the old stone circles that they thought were something quite different and showed that they were ancient elven Waystones, which is how many of the old Druids converted and became Jade Wizards some 200 years before the end of the world goes boom. So the Colleges of Magic also tend Waystones, as do a variety of others across the world. But loosely speaking, the elves just have artifacts, devices, stuff in the White Tower, and they watch them slowly winking out. And sometimes when it gets particularly difficult, they go out and they will mount an expedition to try and reaffirm networks where they have grown very, very weak. But we don't have a very strong answer for this. Different books say different things. Alex, I'm working on a Kiprian League homebrew. Nice. Byzantine classic Greek inspirations. I love it, Alex. And I'm thinking of making them set from about -400 to 400 Imperial calendar and have the core deities be hybridized classic gods, elven gods. Does that sound reasonable? Absolutely does. I might consider making the original Kiprian League. Kipris, depending on which version of the background we go for, Kipris existed almost up to the modern day and possibly into the modern day. If we go to the old world, the Kiprian road is still marked, but Kipris is not marked in any of the old world maps, at least as yet. But in other books, the Kipris is definitely marked around about 2510. So Kipris could definitely still be in existence, even though it might not be part of effectively a Byzantine-style empire that came out of, say, for example, the Border Princes. But I think that that is not a bad date. I might be tempted to take it on a little bit later even, because you've got the rise of Myrmidia over in Tilia and Estalia. And again, depending on which version of the background we go with, that's around about 300 IC, up to around about 900, depending on where we go. And a lot of that will be drawing upon certain Riemann Empire aspects as well. So you would probably want to have them all running about the same time. So I think you could easily go later than that date if you wanted to do so, and not necessarily bump into anything that would be weird. But that'd be pretty damn good. As for the hybridization of classical and elven gods, I think that's very reasonable. And in fact, building a pantheon around that is almost certainly the most likely way to build something that feels real for that part of the world. Hannah! Hi, Hannah! What's the relationship between channeling and perceiving the winds of magic? Would a college-trained wizard be capable of perceiving all the winds? So the answer to this is yes and no. I'll go into a little bit more detail. But before I do, I'll say for those of you expecting Sotek, so was I. Sotek, sadly, is currently otherwise detained. We're hoping he'll turn up. If he doesn't, then we'll do this stream, which is meant to be a tier listing stream for the Colleges of Magic next week, and it'll be fine. So Hannah says, what's the relationship between channeling? So channeling and perceiving are two different things. There is, loosely speaking, extra senses that wizards have. Channeling is basically the etheric sense, the magical sense of touch. It's your ability to reach out, touch a wind of magic, and move it into different shapes. So think of it as that. Your witch sight, your ability to perceive the winds, is your etheric sense of sight. It's your ability to see. Now, if you can channel a wind, as in, let's say I am an amethyst wizard, and I can channel Shyish, the purple wind of magic. I can see that dusty, cobwebby wind gathering around all places where Shyish gathers, and I can pull at it and pull it into myself and channel it. I can channel that wind using effectively my etheric sense of touch, move it into a spell shape, say the words of magic, and because the wind is in the correct shape, I manifest spells out of that, perhaps throwing gigantic cackling skulls at my enemies. Sounds like fun. So I can do that, but can I see the other winds? And the answer to that is, actually, it depends on the source you go with. It's really different in different books. Some suggest you can see all the winds of magic and everything is fine. Whenever you concentrate, you can see it. Others say you can only see your own wind and you can practice trying to see the other winds too. And it takes time and patience to learn how to do this. What's certain is, regardless of what version of the background you go with, eventually, with enough practice and training, you can see most, if not all, of the winds of magic. Some winds of magic are very difficult to see, for example. Shyish is one of those. They're quite difficult to grasp. The most difficult of all is Hysh, the white wind of magic. It takes a lot to see that diffuse, very pale white wind in the air. And it takes extreme gatherings of that wind for other wizards to see it, often around the holiest of places that have this almost halo of white light around them. So, loosely speaking, the relationship between channeling and perceiving is that one is effectively like touch and the other one is sight. And college-trained wizards are capable of perceiving all of the winds, but most iterations of the lore suggest they can only see their own wind, and other winds comes with practice and time. Hopefully that helps. Archimagio, how do the elves feel about the Light College incorporates the Hekaran influences? Why did they deviate from elven teachings? Who say that they did? Different versions of the background will give us different stories. The real reason is because the colleges of magic back in the day, when they were very first being described, weren't attached to the elves at all. And light magic, as it was very first perceived, was almost holiness, the great the Tower of Knowledge and the Great Snake and the tree, and there's a whole bunch of ancient symbols that were attached to the light wind. As time went on and the colleges of magic became a different thing with different editions of the game, the original trappings of the very first wizards that were described stuck. So we ended up with very close to Hekaran influences for the Light College all the way through. And different writers have attempted to justify this in different ways. But loosely speaking, there isn't a great answer that I've yet read that I really like. Pyramids absolutely do draw Haishin in a variety of ways that other shapes do not. So, heck, that's a start. The great serpent that is Hesh is somewhere in there too, and you'll find that's often stylized as a cobra or a great hooded snake or a light wizard's staff, the great Hesh the snake. So, there's some loose parts there, but it's weakly put. So, I think this is a big story that could be exploded. dealt with on a greater degree. Loosely at the moment, at best, we get they have strong Nehekara influences, they've got pyramids, they've got lots of things that look like they come from Nehekara, and they spend a great deal of time explaining what they have, but not really explaining why in a great deal of depth. And I think there is some really good reasons we could have, and I don't think they would necessarily invalidate what the elves would have started with. After all, elven pyramids are not only common, there's a lot of them. Take a look at, say, for example, the Shrine of Cain, or indeed the Shrine of Azurin. Indeed, the shrines of the gods are often sitting atop peaks or pyramids, and the shrines are the holiest places that gather the greatest amount of Hesh. So I'm going to argue that it doesn't deviate from elven teachings. It instead adds on top of elven teachings, and the elves themselves will have used existing human teachings so that they could understand what they were doing. I think it's just a bit more complicated than some writers have yet really delved in with. I hope that at least gives us a start or some help there. And for those of you expecting Sotek, hopefully he will be turning up soon. If he does not, we will move the planned stream of the day over to next Wednesday. Right, where are we next? Are we here? Edel 17. If we go with the idea that humans are uniquely wielding divine magic, yes, could it be how the old ones intended them to use it as a safer method? Anti-chaos. Yes. You could argue the old ones meant it. After all, the gods were certainly a part of the old ones' plan. And the elven gods are a core component of what Ulthuan was back when the old ones were even on the Warhammer world. So the old ones and the gods are definitely not separate. So gods are a thing, and how humanity used magic, especially holy magic, was also something that the old ones have. If we take a look at the roots of Albion, where the old ones and the most powerful human wizards were, they were using effectively forms of magic that were both divine and also directly tied into the winds of magic as we understand them. So could this be the case? Yes. Did the old ones want anti-chaos? That's up to you to decide. It could be equally argued that the old ones intended for chaos to happen. That might sound controversial, but we've had multiple streams in the past where it shows that the old ones had purpose, and that purpose could have been the destruction of the Warhammer world and the creation of what eventually becomes Age of Sigmar. If you know any of your Age of Sigmar lore, you'll understand why. The Singemeister, what would Colleges do with a living dead slan? If there was a living or dead slan, it almost certainly would be going back to the Lizardmen. And that's not because the Colleges of Magic would wish it to be so. That's because the Lizardmen would wish it to be so, and almost certainly would go to war for it. After all, they have access to a variety of different methods for allowing them to effectively teleport anywhere in the world. Effectively, this would turn into war. And what you're describing is a situation where, say, for example, they had found a dead slan that would cause, ripples that would be detected by the slan all the way over in their temple cities, and they would come to pick it up. Indeed, something along these lines is something that was going to be a core component of one of the many potential plots for a campaign called Past of the Old Ones that I was once going to be writing with Gav Thorpe. And this was not exactly what we were going to do, but there's definitely something in that we were going to run with, and that was going to be super fun. Okay, again, we don't have Sotek turning up, and I'm a little concerned that he might not be turning up. That being the case, I'll finish off the questions that we have, and we probably move this stream on to next Wednesday, but who knows, he might turn up in the next 5-10 minutes, and that would completely invalidate that. So, Ellie the Grey, speaking of putting NPCs into different political camps, how do you decide to create your political factions in your campaigns? Continued in chat. So, Ellie the Grey, how do I do it? It depends on the story I'm wanting to tell. If I want to tell a political story, I just do what humans do. I create the first thing, and then create something that sits opposite, and then build up the characters involved with each, and then suddenly, slowly but surely, we start building camps. I generally suggest, if you're looking for an easy way to do it, is look at real world politics. How do different camps form there? What are the different beliefs and why have they built? And then reflect that over into your fantasy world and don't make it the same thing. You don't go, my right wing is this, my left wing is that. But instead you go, the conservatives who believe that we should preserve the original way of thinking. People who've got new ideas coming in and they are now doing this. People who think that magic is destructive and needs to be curtailed and needs to do a different thing. They'll start forming their own political bank. And then you just slowly but surely build up enough that you've got some strong views. You build an NPC to stand as an anthropomorphization of each view. So one NPC who very much heartily believes in each part of it and leads the NPCs who are in that political bank. And slowly but surely you build an entirely new form of politics. And it will often be built around whatever the fantasy starting point you have. The Light College of Magic, for example, can very easily have people who think it is very dangerous to approach magic in a new fashion, particularly given what happened with Egrin van Horstman and the Cabal. That will change politics in the Light College. We'll also have those who actually believe that what Egrim discovered was true, which can have a lovely little chaotic bank inside the Light College if you wish to do so. The Cabal almost certainly still have agents in the Light College and all the other colleges as well. There's lots of different things you can do. Loosely speaking, I create my political camps by starting off with whatever group that it is that I'm starting with, and then thinking about how the traditionalists will move against those who are new thinkers, and then think about whatever it is that I'm discussing and the different ways it can express, and then add a political camp for each one. Hopefully that helps a little bit. The Bloat Person, hi, the Bloat Person. Barring Gromril of the Mar Warpstone, what are the other magical materials in Warhammer? I recall the Cursed Sword being made of Silverine, if that's one. Oh, there's so many of them, particularly because Warhammer has been written by so many different writers down through the ages. Mithril, for example, right from Tolkien, is mentioned in more than one Warhammer book, which is clearly daft. But nevertheless, the old paint that used to be sold by Games Workshop was Mithril Silver. That was the one that we all knew when I was growing up. Mithril Silver, it's your lightest silver paint, in comparison to, say, Boltgun Metal, which was a really dark one, but Boltgun Metal came long after Mithril Silver. The very first Citadel color paint set, that red one with the big yellow golden demon on the front, had Mithril Silver in it. There's as many magical materials as you require. For example, each one of the 8 winds of magic can manifest as a solid material. You'll often get a variety of different books saying that a crystal of, for example, amber crystal of the brown wind or the orange wind or the amber wind of magic. Okay, it's effectively just like Warstone, but just for amber. And that is its own magical material. And all of the winds have this too. And there are different names for that being manifested across the Warhammer world. And then, of course, you've got all manner of creatures which create materials that are effectively magical. The most obvious of which would be things like Dragonbone and Dragon Scale, all of which have got magical properties and can contain and hold magical things in the Warhammer world that normal materials cannot, like, for example, dwarven runes. So the answer to this one is there's a lot. Tyrant 25. Andy, I saw a picture of an elephant at a grocery store. Glad to hear it. And now I'm mad that my ogre PC can't fit in a tavern. Yeah, I can imagine. Ogres don't fit in standard taverns. You need to have very, very tall words. Now, if you haven't seen how big ogres are, I very recently over on social media, so it'll be sitting over on, I don't know, Blue Sky. I think I popped it up there. Maybe I posted it on X, although I don't like going there very often. X is a bit meh. But I think I posted it there as well. But you can see how LAWhammer views. If you scroll back like 5 or 6 posts, you'll see that I did a quick post because Owlcat did a nice little scale comparison for different species in the 40k world. And I very quickly posted up how we did one for Warhammer and posted up the quick scale difference. And ogres are massive, truly huge. Misgard, Magisters, Vigilant, and Witch Hunters. Who does what? Magister, Vigilant are effectively the witch hunters of witches. They are witches who hunt down other witches. Nice and easy. Witch hunters are normal, mundane people, or possibly holy people, depending on which one you go with, who hunt down witches, and they do it in different ways. And the important part here is illegal. Magisters Vigilant chase down the witches in the Empire who are illegal, or magisters or wizards college wizards who are now doing illegal things and need to be brought to justice. Where witch hunters are either those that are sent by one of the cults, like, for example, the Order of the Silver Hammer have got its witch hunters component, and their witch hunters are effectively holy warriors who hunt down illegal witches. But there's also state-sanctioned witch hunters who are just basically bounty hunters who can hunt down witches. They don't have any special powers. They're just people, often with guns, because that means you can take them out from afar, attempting to stop witches from doing what they do and turning them in for bounties. So, yeah, loosely speaking, they hunt illegal witches, all of them. Sometimes witch hunters also hunt legal witches because, well, they just do. Hello! Hi, Jeff! I'm painting a Serapon Stegodon. Nice! Can you give me 3 colours for me to try and put something together? And have you any Lisbon models? I have, I don't know, about 300 or 400 of them. So the answer is yes. 3 colours. Let's go for a bright jade green, a really coral orange, and a quite bright sun yellow. Yellow, jade green, and nice coral orange. How does that sound? Hey, Jack, Ruby is Adios, Sultan the Avenger in your headcanon. Yes, Sultan has been in my headcanon pretty much since the beginning, because Sultan was always a god that I used. For example, in 2nd edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Sultan is there in more than one place and is described as Sul, the god that was a core component of Solent, one of the old provinces of the Empire. And then as we move through to the newer edition, Sultan pops up again and again. So, Sultan the Avenger in my headcanon? The answer is yes. Again, for those of you expecting Sotek, so did I. Hopefully he'll turn up. If he doesn't, well, never mind. We had some fun time answering some questions, and we'll do our tier list next week. Cole Patterson missed the last stream, so have some questions. Excellent. First, what do you think of the connection between Aborish and Myrmidia hinted at in some places? Aborish and Myrmidia. Now, I'm taking a wee while to answer this one. I think I don't really want to discuss them, because I don't discuss things that are a part of what we're doing in LAWhammer. Now, I'm not saying that Abarash and Myrmidia are connected in LAWhammer, but I am saying that there is something that this question impacts. So I will say that I definitely think that some connections here would make for some good stories. Hopefully that's not too vague. Scathane, by the way, love your arcane magic spell word list on LAWhammer Patreon. Please do more lores, maybe some prayers too. I'm actually doing that. When Sotek popped over and he was playing a Grey Wizard, I did all of the Grey College spells that were needed by him. That was around about 30 odd spells that I created. And all of those had got their own arcane language words as well. So I can probably dump up those at some point. So yeah, we will be doing more. Prayers I've not done, because that actually requires quite a bit of thought and will take time. And I don't have a great deal of time because I'm doing so many other things. So on that one, maybe, but on spells, yeah, definitely. Sticks and stones. What are some examples of the winds changing people? Bright Wizards being on fire is classic, but how does light shadow manifest? Now, there's a bunch of arcane marks in more than one edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Arcane marks are effectively, if we're being uncharitable, legal mutations that happen because so much of one wind of a magic is moving through a human. And you're right, it's very common for bright wizards to go bright orange with hair and be particularly jittery, and for flames to plick up. Light wizards are known for becoming extremely logical, for losing their emotions, for becoming very philosophical creatures, for having eyes that literally glow white, which is obviously not so great. The shadow wizards are known for sometimes having a shadow that flickers around and goes all over the place, for becoming sort of rangy and lean and being more prone to traveling from one place to the next and the next, incessantly, unendingly, and incapable of stopping from doing so. I would suggest go check out the Realms of Magic book for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, or the Winds of Magic book for 4th edition, for a variety of different arcane marks for all 8 of the Winds of Magic. That'll hopefully give you a good idea. Ted Barrera, thanks very much. Are there any gods of magic able to cut off wizards' ability to use the winds or sorcery, either from being displeased or just have a laugh at the silly mortal? So yes is the answer to this. So if we go on one side first, which is divine magic, all of the gods are capable of cutting off, and frequently do when Wrath of the Gods drop down, cutting off magic. When it comes to mages and wizards and their ability to use magic, now we're in a little bit more of a shaky area. If their magic comes from a god, which is almost always the case for 3 of the great chaos powers, for example, or some other species out there as well who get their magic from gods, it's frequently taken away from them, and that might not be a good thing. If you get the Wrath of Tzeentch and you happen to be a Tzeentch sorcerer, not so good. You might not be casting your spells anymore, but that's kind of random and doesn't always occur. Khorne is a god also who has a variety of methods of stopping people from using magic at all, including slapping a collar of Khorne on someone that not only makes them incapable of using magic, it also means that no magic under normal circumstances will affect them also. Beyond that, there's just a bunch of gods that deal with magic, and sometimes if you get the wrath of that god, it will impact and sometimes end your ability to use magic, either on the short term until you do some form of penance, or possibly even on the long term. Lilith over in the Elven god pantheon is known for working with magic, as is to a degree Hoeth, who is the god of wisdom. And sometimes getting the wrath of that particular god might impact magic, particularly because elves view magic as a gift from the gods anyway. So loosely speaking, the answer here is kind of yeah, but most of the time, wizards don't really have that sort of fear ahead of them. Gideon, tinfoil hat theory. Part of the reason the High population started to decline was that because over time, a higher proportion was afflicted by the curse of Cain, based on how genealogy works. I think that's a great tinpot theory, and remember that every single one of the Everqueens is affected with the curse of Cain. It's just writers often forget about it because they're all descended from Inarian. So, yeah, that's something that everyone likes to forget, but that is a thing. So, yeah, I think this is not necessarily a bad idea, but the Curse of Cain affects the Dark Elves as much as it affects the High Elves, and there's probably a bunch of them over there with it too. So that being the case, it is probably not this, but I think you could make a good argument that it is. Fanciful Bread. Thank you. What is the most unique method of spellcasting? Oh gosh, there isn't a unique method of spellcasting. I mean, you name it, there'll be someone out there in the Warhammer world giving it a go, ranging from the really weird, almost gastromantic options that the butchers have over the ogres, to the Wa magic, which is actually, if I'm honest, it is one of the most unique versions of magic in Warhammer, is Wag magic, because it is now very similar to how 40k Wa magic works over on a completely different side of the universe. It works quite unlike most of the Winds of Magic stuff. For all, if we look at how, for example, Age of Sigmar picked it up, it start tying it through to and attaching it to Gur. That has yet to be the case in Warhammer in any great extreme, although Gur is quite clearly running through all greenskins in the Warhammer world. So I'll probably pull out the greenskins for that one. That guy, you know, who would win, Sigmar or Tiber Septon? That's an interesting question. I'm going to go... That's an interesting question. I'm going to go with stalemate. It's going to be a big, huge draw. Alex, don't forget those Twitch cheers. Yeah, thanks. Have I missed some? God damn it. So if I've missed some, I'm going to now scroll back and see if I can find them. I didn't get a ping for any of them, but given that you said they're there, I'm going to take a few moments. And while I'm scrolling back, I will say, for those of you who are wondering where Sotek is, so am I. I think we're going to move I've got one of them. Here's one. Apologies for missing that. If you chuck money at you, would you please explain how I should go about making the Grey College oaths? Holy crap, that's going to be a big job. You can make them bigger or smaller. You're going to need to come up with something that binds the Grey Wizards to the College and the Emperor and the Patriarch and the Elector Counts and ensures that they never go beyond their remit as you determine it to be for your version of the Grey College. And I would almost certainly also add some form of, gently speaking, oath of... I mean, they're going to need to effectively not be stealing. So some sort of oath saying that they don't collect coin. That's a toughie, and I'll probably give an answer for that eventually over in LAWhammer. Dinoman, so from Festus, we know that the Empire has doctors, yes. And the Jade College Wizards also focus, and yes, they do, on healing magic. Does the Jade Order collaborate with doctors for research? No. Or are they sort of rivals? No, not really. They're doing two very different things. Doctors are using science to solve questions of health. Jade Wizards are throwing magic at it, and that has different outcomes. They're not really rivals. They're doing two very different things. Magic will often make some forms of illness worse because it makes it grow. That's what Jade magic does. It makes things grow. Most disease doesn't get helped by Jade magic, for example. Different winds might be able to affect disease. Pulling the life out of a disease, possibly, but you're now looking more at Shyish and possibly even Light. Light's got healing applications. Even the Bright Wind has healing applications, but they are not really rivals. They're also doing two completely different things. It doesn't actually matter about doctoral research for a Jade Wizard. How the body works is far less important than how magic works and the impacts that it has. Could they benefit from some knowledge that doctors have? Sometimes, but in the greater scheme of things, they are almost antithetical to each other in terms of how they manifest. Okay, that appears to be all of the comments. Apologies for missing those. If I've missed another one, please repost it and tell me, but hopefully I've got them all. Right, now scrolling down, here we go. What's most? You've done that one already. Tiber Septum, we've done that one already. And we arrive here. Brock 6000 as a GM, do you think it's fair for players to know or figure out if an enemy is way above their ability level and a battle would be futile, or do you prefer your players can get in over their heads? I totally think it's okay for players to get in over their heads. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which is a game that's generally attached to Warhammer, if you are playing that, has a lovely way of getting around this. Fate points. Lives. It has an ability to fix dice rolls, so even impossible opponents can be hit. No matter what you are in Warhammer, you can go down to a bunch of nobodies sometimes. That is an outcome. But equally, if you are much better than others, a single Dark Elf Assassin will probably take out an entire party with absolute ease. Warhammer combat's always dangerous. And if you go against something that's too powerful, you, at least in Warhammer, you can say, oh crap, I'll survive this by spending a fate point. And that fate point keeps you alive for the next time. Generally speaking, no problems with this at all. And indeed, if you watch LAWhammer, you'll see that we do this a lot. The players are often in against things that they are massively outclassed by, yet they still get through. They still manage to do things. Sometimes they're clever and they come up with ways to deal with it. Sometimes they just put their heads down and hope that whatever it is that they have passed by doesn't zap them with lightning and murder them all. You've watched LAWhammer, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and it did involve Skaven. But yeah, I have no problems with this at all. I think it is a core component of Warhammer. Cole Patterson, second, do you know where the idea of a vamp named Harkon is from? There's Lord Harkon in Skyrim. It's taken from Warhammer, or both taken... I don't know which one came first. Harkon is old in Warhammer. Let's go back. Let's have a little look. So Warhammer... let's see which one predated which. First Harkons, that'll be... That's 2000... 5th edition had that. So that's 1990s. Skyrim. So Warhammer came first in this instance by some significant part, but I'm not sure where it originates from. That one, I don't know the actual answer to. Hey, Dynaman. Hopefully I've not missed any of your other cheers. I think I'm on it. Thinking of sanctioned versus unsanctioned mages, yes. It's a bit odd when the lore says this type of person is generally shunned, and only this part of society uses them, and then all of the factions using them openly, looking at alchemists being only used by dragon children other than jetmen. Yeah, there's lots of incomplete writing in Warhammer, and there's a lot of writing that could do with a bit of extra embellishment. And generally speaking, whenever something like this occurs, I would suggest that you just have a wee think about how you can make it work. And in most instances, you can make it work without too much difficulty. After all, the Warhammer world is a really big place. And for all that a large area may shun, a local area may not. And there's often ways that we can build this into stories. Particularly when you look at something like, say, hedge witches. Hedge witches, not hedge wizardry as in just illegal wizardry, but the old form of magic that is hedge witchery. You'll find it first detailed in Shades of Empire for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2, or alternatively in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4, there's a bunch of extra hedge witch mentions in there. Hedge witches work on the fringes of Empire society all over the Empire. But they're illegal, but they still work with many communities. So they are both shunned and accepted depending on the situations. So the things are complicated. Life is complicated. And I generally prefer when things are a bit complicated. Moving down, Gneevil. Some humans worship other species gods like Grunye and the Great Maw. Are there any instances of humans worshipping such gods using miracles? None in lore. And probably the way that it should be, because that's not really how they work. But individual GMs will go their own direction with this. Angel Tubrai. I probably said that wrong. Angel Tubri? Angel Tubrai. Whatever. Avoiding any spoilers I can for LAWhammer and its status. I'm loving it, by the way. Oh, thanks very much. May I inquire what are the whereabouts of Gelt in the Warhammer world? He is currently in the Gold College. Dynaman! So Jade is more for healing wounds by regrowing tissue and doctors focus on all forms of medicine. Yes, absolutely. Spot on. Watchdog, how much of a difference would there be in LAWhammer if Elric was a life wizard from the start, as it seems like that was what he was meant to be? So first, he was not meant to be a life wizard. In fact, there's a whole story there. But it would have been a very different story for Elric. Of that, there's no doubt, because Elric is a pyromancer who comes from the Bright College, a very militaristic college that he did not get on with at all. His mindset did not match their mindset. To be fair, though, he would not have got on very well with many parts of the Jade College as well, for all he was raised by many who were part of the Jade College. And there, so I partly missed one cheer up there. Let's bring this up. So I'm just going to bring this one up, Amadeus. Thanks very much for pointing out. Apologies for that. Among the magic institutions to be ranked, will there be the Tower of Hoeth? Yes. Sorcerer's Coven of Grond? Yes. The Mortuary Cult? Probably. The Necratch Brotherhood? Nah, it's not really a school, so to speak. The Ice Institute of Kislev, if you're meaning the Sisterhood? Yes, so we will be including all of those. And with that, we've reached the end of all those questions. Hopefully, I've not missed any as I went down. I will say the following. We haven't had Sotek, or if he has arrived anywhere, he's not popped up. So we're going to boost this episode over to next Wednesday. So that being the case, next Wednesday, I will see you all at approximately 10 p.m. UK time, where we will be ranking the colleges of magic. Oh, Tebrera just popped in. Vargos and Vargeis. I'll pick that one up next time, because I'm going to pop up, but I will note that one down over in my own chat. In fact, I'll go and drop it over into my Discord, since you bothered putting it in. Thank you very much for that chat. But I'm going to pop off now. And sorry for those of you who turned up for Sotek, but we will get him next week on next Wednesday. So until then, in fact, not until next Sunday, I'll say ta-ra, but I'll also say another couple of quick things. Number one, this Friday we will be doing LAWhammer, and this Saturday I'm going to be streaming directly from the Chimera Festival with Inside the Rookery, where we're going to be speaking to some lovely folks from Chaosium, Lynn Hardy and Stuart Boone. Actually, Lynn Hardy is one of the line developers over at Chaosium. It's 25 years. No, it's not. It's 50 years. 50 years of Chaosium. So we're going to be discussing Call of Cthulhu in particular. If you want to watch that live, that'll be super fun. But beyond that, all I can say is I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.